Hello, I'm Jim McClanahan, W4JBM, Whiskey 4 Juliet Bravo Mike, and here on the bench beside me is a Yaesu FT-101ZD Mark III that I've been working on. I actually bought this, it's probably been 5 or 6 years ago at a hamfest here locally. It was a small hamfest. I've been wanting a radio that hopefully one of these days I get to retire, and I wanted a radio at that point that I could maintain, take care of myself, and I didn't feel confident that I could do that with some of the other things that I have, like the Yaesu or the Kenwood 570D, and some of the others that have a lot of surface-mounted components, custom components, the LCD displays, the rotary encoders and things like that. They're great features and they're fun radios to have and operate, but in terms of maintaining it yourself, it's not necessarily something that you want to bite off, especially with some of the more obscure problems. So I thought that I at one point owned actually my first radio was a Yaesu FT-101E that I was very happy with and have always regretted selling. And now when I saw this, I thought, hey, this is going to be a great radio for me to fix up, get going, and maintain for the long run. So I was at the Hamfest, and actually had looked around and was in the process of leaving, and just outside the front door there was a little old man and his wife sitting there with at a card table. And they had this radio, and they actually had another FT-101ZD Mark II. And he told me that he was getting ready to move into a retirement community, and that he was not going to be able to set up an antenna, wouldn't be able to use his radios, and because of that he was selling them off. All he was going to be able to do was use his 2-meter handheld rig. So I looked it over. It looked like it was in good shape cosmetically. I didn't open it up, which in retrospect was a mistake. But he seemed very sincere, very honest, and I wound up buying it. I paid around, I think it was $350 for the radio. It also has the accessory tuner and the foam patch and external speaker. So I felt like I'd got a reasonable deal, maybe a little more than I would have paid, but there was a sob story associated with it, so I didn't feel that bad about it. As soon as I got it home and plugged it in, one of the first things that happened after about a minute or so of listening on 40 meters, the audio just kind of, it dropped dramatically and kind of became tinny, dropped in level and became tinny. So I was thinking maybe there was a bad switching diode, maybe a bad capacitor in one of the audio sections. And that's when I opened it up and looking at the capacitors on the power supply board. It was pretty clear that it had not been operated anytime recently, and that it needed quite a bit of TLC to get back into shape. So I wound up, I've totally recapped it. All of the electrolytic capacitors came out of it. I replaced all of the relays. It uses some miniature relays, actually 3 miniature relays, as part of the transmit and receive functionality, switching functionality, and I've replaced those. They're little things that not that hard to get to, kind of expensive to find and buy. I found these at Future Electronics out of Canada, and wound up buying 20, which got me up over the minimum order, and I think they were just a little over $1 a piece. If you find them here in the States, a lot of times they're running more like $5, $6, $7 each. So I ended up getting 20 for about what I would have paid to just buy 3 without going to someplace like Future. One other interesting problem that I had was when I started working on the clarifier. The clarifier is one of the things that is controlled by one of these relays. The relay had some issues. I replaced the relay, and then I started trying to align the clarifier. And the first step in that is to set the clarifier basically to 0. It set it at the center, and I did that and I adjusted. I couldn't get it to adjust. Where with the clarifier off, when you turned it on, you were on the same frequency receive-wise. It always shifted, and no matter how much, it just seemed like it was out of the adjustment range to bring it in. And I struggled with that for about a half hour before I figured out that at some point somebody, to correct the relay problem, had pulled off the the knob on the clarifier and shifted it around and put it back on, and it was off significantly. When I put the knob back on like it should have been, then it was very easy to get in. But it was one of those little problems that you don't expect to encounter. And it's not necessarily when you're working kind of behind the scenes and in the guts. That's not necessarily obvious. You turn around and you adjust this to the center of the dial, and you think you're good, but you're not really. But as I've gone through this, I've found just a number of small problems. I've been able to fix them. I will say the FT-101ZD is not as easy to repair as the FT-101E was, but it's still not unreasonable, and I feel like that once I get the capacitors replaced and the relays replaced, that this is going to be a reliable rig. I may have a transistor or a diode fail now and then, but I feel also much more confident about being able to troubleshoot it after the experiences I've had. A lot of times when you get into a radio, you'll start finding things, subtle little things that might not be obvious at first. I've got a FRG7 that I bought from the original owner, and when I went through it, I found about a half dozen little problems aligning it. It was sold to me as working perfect, and it worked good. But there's, like, one of the things in that was there's a dual JFET mixer, and there's a balance adjustment that you have to go through to make the mixer work optimally. One of the JFETs was actually bad, but the design is robust enough that even with a single JFET, and even though everything was kind of out of whack, it still continued to operate reasonably well. So, you know, those are the kind of things that you wouldn't necessarily know just by listening to it, even at a hamfest, or even if you opened it up and looked at it, you wouldn't know that. So as you go to a hamfest and you're thinking about buying something, I guess that's kind of the point that I wanted to get to and why I decided to make the video. I think there's a couple things to keep in mind. First off, I think it's important to do your homework. Like with the FRG7, I had wanted one for a very long time. I actually had saved money to buy one when I was a teenager, and I wound up buying the Radio Shack DX300 for the simple fact that the DX300 had a digital frequency display, whereas the FRG7 was still an analog dial display, which was a mistake. The FRG7's a fantastic radio, very robustly built, solid piece of gear, but I knew I wanted one of those. This, on the other hand, I bought thinking it would be very similar to the FT-101E, and not realizing that it actually had gone through quite a series of evolutions before it got to the ZD. And once again, the digital dial, the LED readout, is what attracted me to it. I had that, and I thought I had basically an FT-101E with a digital readout, and it turns out that it's a totally different radio. So I did not do my homework, and I should have. I'm not unhappy with it. I'm glad I bought it. I'm happy with the radio now. But there have been others where I have not been. I've bought on the spur of the moment. I didn't realize some of the shortcomings or limitations of it, or how hard it was to work on. An ICOM R70 receiver is a good example of one that I bought spur of the moment, and it was a bear to work on. There were a couple of little problems with it, and very difficult to isolate, very difficult to work on. It's also good to be able to, if you can, check the radio before you buy it. It's kind of a mixed blessing. If the radio hasn't been powered up in a while, you may be better off not powering it up. You may be better off bringing it up slowly to reform the capacitors. Also things like the dial, if the dial is bound, actually that's one of the things that the realistic DX300 and the 302 are notorious for, is that there's nylon gears inside of it, and they will bind over time, and if you force the dial by trying to turn it to see if it turns free, you can easily break one of those, and the parts are just not available. Some people have found some RC model car parts that can be used to replace it, but it's very difficult to find the exact replacement parts to get it all put back together again and have it working free like it should be. You know, that if you do check, I feel comfortable checking one that's been sold as I use it every day, or I've used it in the last couple of weeks. If something that's really truly set for 10 years in a garage, I'd rather not twiddle the knobs. I'd rather not power it up. I'd rather know that in advance and assume I'm going to have to go through and probably do some work on the mechanics, lubricate some stuff, maybe find some stuff that's binding and break it free, reform the capacitors or replace the capacitors. The other thing is kind of, they talk about sometimes investing in a company. Don't invest more than you can afford to lose. I think that same philosophy holds for radios. I don't think you should pay more for a radio than if it turns out that it's just a total loss. You can afford. You obviously hope it's not a total loss. Even with this, if I would have given up in the early days, I probably could have turned around, been honest about the issues, and sold it and recovered a fair amount of what I had paid for it. But I've had radios that I spent $50 for, $100 for, that just turned out to not be repairable. And there's been some of those that I've used for parts. There's been some of those that I've sold to others to use for parts. The bottom line is, don't spend a bunch of money. Don't spend your life savings on a used radio that hasn't been thoroughly gone through. At that point, I would start seriously considering one of the dealers or somebody that's got a good reputation in the industry for refurbishing equipment. And kind of the last point is, this is a hobby and it's supposed to be fun. So when things are going wrong, you really should be, if you can't view it as an adventure or as a learning experience, it's probably not fun for you, and that's counter to things being a hobby. So it's if you can't view it as being fun, I'd encourage you to sell it and move on to the next one. Even if you take a little bit of a loss, it's not worth it, at least to me, to have it be overly frustrating and ruin the overall experience of the hobby. Anyway, I just wanted to share those thoughts about the radio and also about the hamfest buying. And hopefully I'll have this thing put together in the next, I'm hoping this weekend. It's a Saturday, and I'm really hoping by the end of today I can have it put together, get a microphone wired up for it, and maybe I'll see you on the air. Thank you very much.